natural to us that we just think, oh yeah, of course. But again, he comes up with it. Plato comes up with the idea that we have different centers in the psyche. Right? And each center has a different cognitive relationship to the world and motivates us in different ways. And he represented this mythologically, right? He said, there's like a part of us that's like a man. I want to say something here right now, because although Athenian democracy is horribly sexist and treats women horribly, so remember that context, because what's intriguing is how much Plato was able to rise above that. Plato argued that women should rule as well as men, that women should be in the army as well as men. Now, he doesn't perfectly free himself, of course, from sexism, but given the context, I think it's very admirable the degree to which he was able to do it. Nevertheless, he does use this idea of a man that's in your head and represents reason. And that man is motivated by the truth, what's true. So he cares about truth and falsity, that's what he cares about, right? And, right, scope, right? You can go into very long-term goals. And it can deal with very abstract entities, like your health, or a essay, right? Very abstract entities. So this is, health. And I should lose weight. That's going to take me several months. And I should do that because it's true that if I lose weight, my health will improve. So why don't I just do it? Well, because opposed to it, there's a monster. Right? And it's sort of in my stomach, genitals, right? And it represents appetite. Now, it does not work in terms of truth and falsity. It works in terms of pleasure and pain. Very different set of norms. Now, there's nothing wrong with operating in terms of pleasure and pain. If you don't have a capacity to work in terms of pleasure and pain, you're dead. So Plato doesn't think the appetites are evil. What he wants you to grasp is that they operate according to different principles than the man. Okay, so they pursue long-term goals? No, immediate. When do you want the cake? I want it now. Now. I'm going to the party now. Right? It works in terms of very superficial properties. All I care about the cake is how it looks. It looks yummy. I don't have some in-depth analysis, right? It's just chocolatey, sweet. So very superficial. Again, that's not necessarily bad. Often, in life and death situations, a superficial appraisal is exactly what you need. I don't need to know a great deal about the inner workings of the tiger. I just need to know, oh crap, deadly, get out of here. These are opposite to each other. Now, I put a space between here, obviously because I'm setting you up for a thing that Plato talks about. But before I do, I want you to notice what Plato's doing with Socrates here. So Socrates didn't really have a theory, he had a practice. Socrates' practice, if you remember last time, was to get people to realize how often what they find salient is rushing ahead of what they find truthful. Do you remember that? What Plato is saying is that's not a coincidence. The reason why that happens is because we have different parts of the psyche that work this way. This makes things salient to you, really catchy, motivates you urgently right now. This is the part that you use to understand. And see, here's what most of us face. This monster is constantly racing ahead of what we understand. Do you see? What Plato is doing is it's explaining why we we are so prone to bullshit. Why salience often exceeds understanding. We are perpetually vulnerable. And we'll talk about why we have this. Now, let's go back to the dieting example. What helps, though? There's certain strategies you can use, of course, to improve, right, how you frame things, and we'll talk about that later. But typically, what's one of the things that improves people's chances of losing weight? They join a group, like Weight Watchers, right? Or they join a study group to avoid the procrastination. Why? Well, here's an important thing. You're not just a biological creature. As I've been arguing throughout, you're also cultural. You have evolved you're the result of evolution that has crossed several species in which you come wired to learn about abstract symbol systems, use technologies, both physical and psychotechnologies. So you have a lot of powerful cultural, socio-cultural motivations. So he compared this to a lion, because lions are social animals. They're quite and lions have been associated with sort of honor, because that's, right? That's what this works in terms of. It works in terms of honor and shame. Right? Honor is to be respected by those you consider your peers. Shame is when you feel that you have failed to gain respect from your peers. We should not confuse shame and guilt. They are not synonyms. Right? Guilt is when you feel that you have failed to meet your own ideal of who you should be. Shame is when you have lost the capacity to get respect from your peers. Now, what's interesting is that, and this is Plato's point, this part of us can pursue sort of intermediate scope. Because we're cooperating with other people, it doesn't operate just short term, but it doesn't quite operate abstract theoretical. It works within the socio-cultural domain. So it can pursue sort of mid-term goals. Not just immediate goals, but not sort of abstract symbolic goals, but socially agreed upon, shared goals. And it works on sort of the cultural aspects of things, not their abstract meaning or their superficial meaning, but their cultural, their shared meaning, the way we can share it with other people. Notice how much you want to share with other people your experience. So I've been saying this for years, I still see people doing it, even people that I've taught it to. People will reliably do this. They'll be eating something. They'll trying it for the first time, and they'll go, "Oh, this tastes horrible, have some." They'll give it to somebody else, because you want to have that, in addition to whatever immediate response you're having, you want there to be a shared cultural meaning to what's happening in your experience. And there's good reason for that, because, as I've been arguing throughout, your connection to distributed cognition is one of the most powerful ways you increase your cognitive power over the world. Now, he sort of represents this as being like in the chest. And this has to do because we feel a lot of our social emotions and motivation in the chest. You know, your pride and honor and, you know, shame, right? Things like that. Now, this is problematic for us. What should go there? Because the Greek word doesn't have a direct English equivalent. Sometimes people put emotion there, that's not quite right. Sometimes people put the word spirit there. That's closer, but the problem with spirit is it has all kinds of spooky associations with it, right? I'm not going to translate it. I'm just going to leave it as is. This is your thymos. This is the part of you that is motivated socially. So, here's an interesting idea Plato has, right? there is a lot of potential conflict in this system. There's a lot of potential conflict in this system. What you want to do is get it properly ordered. Now, when you don't order it, think about what this means. Salience and understanding and participation get out of sync with each other, and then we're subject to bullshitting. We're subject to self-deception. The more inner conflict we have, the more likely we are to engage in self-deception, because these two are out of sync, and the more likely we will become very egocentric. So when people are suffering, especially inner conflict anxiety, they tend to become more self-centered, even selfish. Because when you're experiencing inner conflict, you're getting sort of a threat signal. Some things aren't right. And when people are under threat, they tend to become very egocentric. Again, that's adaptive. Now, we're going to come back to this, but we want to do a little bit of cognitive science. Why do we, what? Why? Okay, it makes sense that we have this as a motivation because we're social creatures, right? One of our greatest adaptation is our ability to cooperate together. So, you throw me into the African savannah on my own and I'm dead soon because, I don't have great claws, I don't have great teeth. Look, what a silly structure, right? I'm teetering around on 2 feet, almost always losing my balance. I can't run quickly. Everybody can see me from a long distance because I'm towering above the grass. My throat and my vital organs are nicely exposed for any predator. This is bad. Okay. But you know what I can do? I can get together with a bunch of other human beings and we can get some pointy sticks and some dogs and then we can kill everything on the planet. Our ability to work together has always been adaptive. So we know why this is here. But why does this have so much more power than this? Well, there's actually an important reason. And this has to do with some work started by Ainsley and others on what's called hyperbolic discounting or temporal discounting. And what Ainsley and other people found is this pattern of behavior exists across species. It's not just something that human beings engage in. You can find it across species. It's even more universal than something like flow. It's not just universal amongst human beings. It's universal across many species. So this is a deeply adaptive mechanism. What does this mechanism look like? Okay, so this is called discounting. And this is a little bit confusing. Discounting is how much you are reducing the salience of a stimulus. The more you discount, the less salient something is, the less it stands out for you, the less it grabs your attention. This axis is time in a tense sense. This is the present, and this is the future. So what I'm showing you is what's happening to discounting, which means how much a stimulus is losing its salience. And this is what it looks like. This is what the curve looks like. Okay? So a present stimulus has a large degree of salience to it. Remember the monster? Something that's in the future, especially as it gets into the far future, much less salience to it. That's why the monster can override the man. But why? Why do we have this? Well, this is actually very, very adaptive. That's why it's a universal phenomenon. How is it adaptive? So, I want you to think about doing you're about to do something here. I don't smoke. I do diet, but I don't smoke. But let's suppose I was doing this. Here's right now, and I decide to smoke a cigarette, right? And that could have one of two options, right? I get a cough here, or I don't get a cough there, or something like that, right? Now, notice, and I'm doing this very simplistically. I'm not saying that whenever you do something, there's only two effects from it. I'm just doing it simplistic, in a very simple manner, so you can understand the point, okay? Now, the probability of now happening is 100% because it's happening. The probability of each one of these happening is 50%. Now, if it goes this way, then there's two more effects. The probability of each one of these is 25, right? And so on. So do you see what's happening? As you move into the future, the probability of any one of these events occurring is going down very fast. Now, here's the thing. This is actually adaptive. You should pay less attention to things that are less probable than happening. That actually makes good sense. The less probable an event is, the less attention you should give it. Imagine if you didn't have this. Imagine if you didn't screen off things that were low in probability. Think about how you would be overwhelmed by all the possibilities. So, if I get out of bed, I might twist my ankle slightly. And that might slow me down getting to class. And if I slow down getting to class, that might have an impact on my mark. And that might cause me to fail my course. And then if I fail my course, that might disrupt my degree. And that might cause me to fail in my career. And then I'm going to end up in Buffalo alone, married to a lamp or something. Now that's ridiculous, right? Now it's possible. It's not impossible, except the last part. You can't really get married to a lamp. But, right? In fact, here's a hypothesis I have. Now, notice the word I used, please. I think one of the things that goes wrong in people who experience generalized anxiety disorder is that this is not working well enough. It's not screening off and making low salient, low probability events. So highly anxious people find things salient that they shouldn't. They find low probability things too salient. So this is really adaptive. This is why you have it. But there's a problem with it. And this is a problem with any adaptive machine. And you're going to see later why this is the case. Okay, let's go back to the cigarette smoker. I smoke, and through a long chain, this is me dying in Hamilton. Right? This is the event of me dying in Hamilton. Lung cancer in my left lung. I'm not going to write these all out. This is me dying in Hamilton of cancer in my right lung. This is me dying in Toronto, cancer left, right. This is me dying in Burlington because, so on. There's all these different deaths. Now here's the thing. Each one of those deaths has a low probability of occurring, right? You see that? Each one of those deaths has a low probability of occurring. But here's the thing about me, and I bet you I share it with you. I don't want to just avoid death in Hamilton, although that would be a particularly bad death. I don't want to avoid just dying in Hamilton. I'm from Hamilton, so I'm allowed to do that. I want to avoid death. I want to avoid all these deaths. Now, think carefully, and I'm using this very technically, but I'm speaking accurately. I want to avoid death in the abstract. I don't want to avoid this death, or this death, or this death, or this death. I want to avoid all possible deaths. I want to avoid death in the abstract. Now here's the thing. The chance of each one of these deaths is very low. But if you pool them together, the chance that cigarette smoking will lead to a premature death is very, 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 very high. Okay, so what does that mean for me? The hyperbolic discounting blinds me to this because it's not very probable, blinds me to this because it's not very probable, blinds me to each one of these because each individually they're not very probable. But in blinding me to each, you know what it blinds me to? What they share in common. It blinds me to what they all have in common. And what they all have in common is a premature death. By blinding me to what they have in common, what they abstractly share, this adaptive machine actually has me take another puff on the cigarette and sets me on the course towards cancer or emphysema. Do you see? Now please remember this. This is going to be a theme we're going to be coming back to again and again and again. I mentioned it before when I talked about flow. The very machinery that makes you adaptive is the machinery that makes you prey to self-deceptive, self-destructive behavior. Part of what meaning and wisdom have to do is they have to wrestle with that unavoidable reality The unavoidable reality is you can't throw this away. You can't throw away this machinery, because if you throw this adaptive machinery away, you're doomed. You can't get out of bed because you're overwhelmed by crippling anxiety. You can't throw it away, but you can't just let it run untutored, because then you smoke the cigarette, you eat the cake, you go to the party, and you harm yourself in a self-deceptive, self-destructive fashion. So what do you need to do? Here's the monster. What you need, and what we developed, is we developed an ability, especially here, frontal lobe area, to form abstract thought, to abstract what is in common in the distant future and symbolically represent it to ourselves. That's what the man does. The man can grasp the abstract thought of avoiding the premature death. But you say, but the man is so weak. The man's weak because you don't want him to be able to shut this off. You want him to be able to override it, but in a very minimal sense, because that's so adaptive. See, so Plato is deeply right. So, in fact, I think Plato is so deeply right, that's why we keep discovering this division. Freud divides the psyche into these three things: the superego, the ego, the id. You know, there was a movement in the 90s in neuroscience to talk about, the reptilian brain, the mammal brain, and the neocortex. We keep rediscovering this Platonic division. But Plato had an interesting idea. He said, you know what? The man can learn. The man is capable of grasping theory, abstract symbolic representation of the case. Now, the lion really isn't capable of theory, but what the lion can do is the lion can be trained. You can use your reason to train your lion. How do you do this? Well, this is where Socrates is so relevant, right? And this is why Plato writes dialogues, because what Socrates did was he took reason into the social arena. Socrates goes into the marketplace and dialogues with people. There's this social interaction is happening, and the social interaction is being wed to rational reflection and to inspiring people to try and overcome self-deception. And so, using a Socratic method, the man can train the lion. And then the man and the lion together can tame the monster. Not kill it, but tame it. And what you want is that teaching of the man, the training of the lion, and the taming of the monster, so that something happens. You reduce as much as possible the inner conflict. So this is like, for Plato describes wisdom as an internal justice within the psyche, in which the man has been taught, the lion has been trained, and the monster has been tamed, so they can get along together as much as is possible. This is what's known as an optimization strategy, right? If I let the monster rule, everything else shrinks to a minimum. What you want is the right coordination of the parts of the psyche so that each can live as much as it possibly can without putting the other two in danger. When you can get that inner harmony, that optimal relation, so each is living as much as it can without putting the other ones in danger, this mutuality of the most existence, this is, for Plato, this is to experience a fullness of being. This is to be as fully alive as you possibly can be. It is also to experience a kind of peace, because your inner conflict has dropped. So this is very powerful. One of your meta drives, in addition to all the drives people have, they want to have whatever they're having without inner conflict. They want to be at peace with themselves. Now, this, of course, is a powerful meta drive that you can tap into. Because if you have a strong drive within you to get this inner justice, to realize wisdom, to get this fullness of being, then I can appeal to it. I can appeal to it Socratically. But notice that this has an important component to it. Because as I reduce inner conflict, my self-deception goes down. And as I reduce my inner conflict, I'm less egocentric. Both of these things are making me more in touch with reality. So, I'm reducing inner conflict. But the effect that's having is, right, I'm getting a clearer vision of reality because my self-deception and egocentrism is going down. Now that matters because, as we've seen before, you want to be in touch with reality. You have a meta drive. Philosophers have various thought experiments for talking about this. One I'll sometimes do with students is I'll say, imagine the following. Right? You go home one day and your parents say, well, come here, I want to show you something. And you say, what? And they take you to this hallway that you've walked down 1,000 times before. And they press on a part on the wall that for you has never meant anything. And when they press, a door opens and there's a room in there and there's TV screens and there's videotape and there's pictures of you at all stages of your life. And then they say the following to you. Just before you were born, 9 months before you were born, we were hired by the government to have you. This is part of an experiment. The government gave us scripts to memorize. And we did this as a part of a government experiment. We don't actually love you or care about you at all. We've just been following the script, doing what we've been doing because the government has hired us to do this. But we're obligated now that you've turned 21 or whatever to tell you the truth. We don't care about you. Now, we still have to keep doing this. When we'll leave the room, you can forget all about this if you want. Right? And we'll just say that what we've always said. We'll tell you how much we love you. We'll make sure that your needs are met. Just know right now that none of that is how we truly feel. Okay? Now ask people, how would you feel? And they'd go, well, I'd be devastated. But I say, but nothing's changed. They're going to still say all the same words to you. They're still going to treat you exactly the same way. And what people say is, well, it's no longer real. Here's another thing I'll do with people. I'll say, how many of you are in satisfying personal relationships? Quite a few people put up their hands. And then I'll say, how many of you would want to know that your partner was cheating on you, even if that meant the destruction of your relationship? Almost everybody puts their hand up. They're willing to destroy this relationship that's giving them so much happiness because they don't want it to be fake. They want it to be real. And we'll talk later about why this need to be real is so important. But I want you to understand what Plato's talking about here. Notice that two of your most important meta drives are being met in the Platonic model. You're reducing inner conflict, and you're becoming more in touch with reality. Now that feeds on itself in an important way. I get better on picking up on real patterns in the world. My skill at picking up on real patterns is improved because I get a clearer vision, I get better at tracking real patterns, right? But what does that mean? Well, as I start to get more inner peace, I start to be able to pick up on real patterns. I get the skill, the vision ability. But of course, what I can do is I can apply that to myself. Socratic self-knowledge. As I get better at picking up on real patterns, I can apply that to myself. I can get better knowledge of myself. As I get better knowledge of myself, I can better teach the man. To be a good teacher, you have to know your student better. As I get better knowledge of myself, I can teach the man. I can better train the lion. I can better tame the monster. So notice what's happening here. I improve a little bit my skill at picking up on real patterns. I use that skill on myself to increase my self-knowledge and get better patterns, which means I reduce my inner conflict. As my inner conflict goes down, I get a clearer vision of reality. As I get a clearer vision of reality, I get better at picking up on real patterns, which means I improve my self-knowledge, which means I reduce my inner conflict. And you see what happens? This starts to spin like this. These two sides feed into each other and reinforce each other and improve each other. And this is wonderful for you because you're becoming less inner conflicted and you're coming more in contact with reality. Now, Plato has a famous story, a parable, a myth in the sense that I'm talking about in this book, in this series. It's called the parable or the myth of the cave. And it's a way of talking about this, the relationship between these things.